All right. Let's get to the good stuff. So Clark and I had a little bit of an argument texting the other day. So as we all know, Ben Roethlisberger recently announced his retirement. It was one of those things everybody kind of knew that was probably what was going to happen. It brings up this debate now that all the quarterbacks of the 2004 draft class are retired. That would be Ben Roethlisberger, Philip Rivers, and Eli Manning. You made a statement that I disagreed with, and so we were talking about quarterbacks getting into the Hall of Fame. You brought up Matthew Stafford, and I thought that Ben Roethlisberger would get in, maybe not on the first ballot because the NFL Hall of Fame is difficult. There's only like 50 writers, and you have to get 35 of them. It's not easy, and you're almost going against other players because there's like rounds to it. It's not like in baseball where it's just you put in a ballot and that's it. So it's hard to get in. So I thought Ben Roethlisberger would probably get in, maybe not on the first ballot. And then you said Ben Roethlisberger should be a Hall of Famer, but Eli isn't. So explain yourself.
First of all, let me preface this by saying I don't think Kurt Warner should be in the Hall of Fame. Okay, so I don't want to get too far into the longevity thing because I think that is part of being a Hall of Famer, but I'm more interested in what you were at your peak, but your peak can't be really short-lived or like intermittent. Like Kurt Warner, it was like not in the league and then really good and then can't hold on to the ball and can't stay a starter, and then he still can't stay a starter, and then he gets an opportunity, and then his team goes 9-7, and they make the Super Bowl because he plays the Carolina Panthers in the divisional round, and Jake Delhomme essentially melts down and throws like 4 interceptions, So because he made 3 Super Bowl appearances, won an MVP, and won Super Bowl, we're supposed to put him in, even though there's this whole stretch where he was just bad in the middle of his career, So Eli Manning, if you take away the 2 years that he made the Super Bowl, even the years that he made the Super Bowl, like the first year he made the Super Bowl, he wasn't that great during the regular season. He was pretty good in the playoffs. But, I mean, even in this, like in the Super Bowl, they were behind 7-3 for most of the game. Okay. And then, I mean, he tried to throw the game away on that last drive, and the Patriots player didn't catch the ball. And then he gets away from those defenders and chucks the ball into the middle of the field. That probably should have been intercepted, but the guy made an unbelievable catch, and then it was basically like you really look at all the years that he was a quarterback, it was just this very like, he had a couple of years where it was like, okay, he was really good that year. But for the most part, it was like if they didn't make the playoffs, like they just weren't that good. And I just look at the Steelers, I look at Roethlisberger, and I'm like, for me, it was much more consistent, for Eli Manning. And it's like, well, the Steelers, they had all those receivers. It's like the Giants had Tom Coughlin. They had plenty of receivers. They had plenty of talent on those teams. Like he would start off a year good, and then it would all kind of fall apart, or they would get to the playoffs and then he would suck, I mean, so it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, you're going to take those 2 years and that's it. You're making him a Hall of Famer based on that. Like,
Okay, so I don't have a problem with your Kurt Warner argument. I understand where you're coming from. The bottom line is he's in, so we can't. It's not your personal Hall of Fame. It's the Hall of Fame. And you look at their numbers; they're pretty much the same. They're both top 10 in passing yards. They're both, they both have. You look at their career stats, regular season, playoffs. They're pretty darn close. And so my argument isn't that I understand everything you're saying about Eli, but if you're going to put Ben in, then you got to put Eli in. There's no possible way. There's no possible way to separate them. You can say Ben's better than Eli if you want, but it's by inches. You look at, so Eli was 8-3 in the playoffs. Ben Roethlisberger was 11-6. yes, Ben Roethlisberger made the playoffs more, but Ben Roethlisberger had 16 years where they had a top 10 defense. He had 3 years where they had the number 1 defense. So my argument is that the Steelers always had a better team. They're a better organization. Like I don't think there's any question about that. And when the Giants made the Super Bowl, that was mostly on Eli's back. Like this wasn't some. Yes, the defense played a great game against the Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. I understand that, but they also played him again, and he beat him again. So, and you said you care about what they were at their peak. Well, in my estimation, there's no question Eli was better at his peak. 2 of the 3 Super Bowls Ben Roethlisberger was in, he didn't even play well. And the one against Arizona, he had a great drive at the end, but he wasn't making. He didn't that throw for the touchdown to Santonio Holmes was fantastic, but I think if we're talking about peak, Eli's better. I don't think there's a question about it.
Okay. I don't know. I just felt like Eli was more prone to just throwing a ton of interceptions, and just I don't know, just overall not. To me, it felt like Roethlisberger was more consistent.
Well, I think you could do more with Roethlisberger, right? Roethlisberger could make plays in more ways than Eli could, right? Ben's going to be able to run with the ball. Ben can get defenders off of him, and make plays outside the pocket, outside the structure. So that's I can understand that argument, but production wise, there's no argument. And yes, he threw some interceptions. Well, this is again to my argument that if you'd let Eli Manning play with the Steelers roster, this wouldn't even be a debate. Eli would have won a hell of a lot more games. So the last 6 years of Eli's career, they didn't make the playoffs. I understand everybody wants to blame Eli for that. I get it. But this isn't the NBA. This isn't the NBA where one great player can just get you to the playoffs all the time. So I can understand that. I'm not disputing the argument that if you think Ben's better than Eli, I get it. But they're both Hall of Famers.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree. I feel like I understand what you're saying about their different organizations, but I just, and I know that some of this is narrative based. Just throughout Eli's career, he was never thought of as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Roethlisberger there was a stretch where he was considered, one of the top 7-8 quarterbacks in the league. Eli was, you'd have weeks where it's like, oh, he looks really good. Then you'd have weeks where he looks really bad, And I just feel like the consistency was never really there. Roethlisberger had bad years. He had bad games. He had bad playoff performances. But, and my argument with Roethlisberger isn't even so much the fact that he's got 2 rings. Like that's part of it, but to me, that's not the main part of it. I just felt like Roethlisberger was much more consistent over the course of his career and gave his team a chance to win much more than Eli Manning did, So it's just maybe I'm splitting hairs, but I don't know. I just felt like it was the whole Eli to the Hall of Fame just on its face feels ridiculous to me,
Yeah, but
I feel like, and that's why, like, if you look, for instance, if I was to look at like Matt Ryan's career, granted, Matt Ryan doesn't have 2 rings, but I mean, he's got an MVP, and he's, if you look at all his numbers and you look at what granted, there was some chaos in his organization, but he's been able to make the playoffs a bunch of times. He's won a bunch of playoff games. When he got the right offensive coordinator, he was the MVP, and they probably should have won that Super Bowl if Kyle Shanahan had run the ball a couple more times. And then people are maybe talking about it differently. I just, I understand what you're saying about it was a lot of it was on Eli's back, them getting to those Super Bowls. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, you were saying what they are at their peak. Yeah, but if a couple things go differently, like the first Super Bowl Roethlisberger was in, he had really nothing to do with them winning that game.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So
I like the way he played throughout the playoffs, though.
yeah, but we're gonna talk about. But Eli did the same thing. Eli on his Super Bowl run, they were a 6 seed. They barely got into the playoffs. They went all the way to the Super Bowl, beat the undefeated Patriots. Like if we're talking about a small sample size, like there's no to me there's it's not even a comparison. The two wins that the two playoff runs that Eli had are far beyond anything Roethlisberger ever did. Now, if you want to say,
I think it's the consistency thing. I just don't feel like Eli was as consistent as Roethlisberger was.
Right, and I could and my
that's the main thing.
Right, my argument is I chalk that up to he got to play for the Steelers for his whole career. Like this is one of the things where I understand what Colin Cowherd is saying about him being an underachiever. It's like there's a whole bunch of quarterbacks who would have won, at least 2 of those Super Bowls. Well, he only won 2, so maybe not. They probably wouldn't have won the Arizona one, but I don't think it would have been that difficult. Eli, to me, what he did in those 2 playoff runs is beyond. He beat the Aaron Rodgers team that was 15-1 in the in the regular season. He beat them in a playoff game. But anyway, regardless of who's better, the point is when you look at their career numbers. You can't make the argument that Roethlisberger is a Hall of Famer and Eli isn't. If you think Ben's better, that's fine. But there's no argument that one of them's a Hall of Famer and the other guy isn't. Get out of here.
They're gonna end up putting Eli in, but I don't agree with it. Like I said, they put Kurt Warner in. I don't agree with that. But I understand the point you're making, and maybe I'm getting too much into narrative here. But it just seems it's not only that I think Roethlisberger's better. I think Eli is borderline. Put it that way. Like I just look at his career and I just don't. I don't see Hall of Fame. I see he had some moments. He certainly had some moments where he looked pretty darn good, but I just can't. I can't really put him in there. It just doesn't. I'm not seeing it. So, but maybe I'm just seeing stuff that's not there. Or I'm overreacting to certain things. I just felt like he was. I just felt like he was. There was a lot of times he was just bad. Now, granted, he still threw 360 touchdowns or whatever. So, how bad can he be if you do that? So, I'm not saying he wasn't a talented quarterback who definitely had some moments, but I'm not really seeing it. But I think he's going to get in. Matt Ryan, I think that's going to be an interesting one. He might end up getting in. Stafford, like I was saying earlier, if Stafford were to win the Super Bowl and have a few more really good years, then you're going to end up looking at his numbers and then the Super Bowl, and then I think he's probably going to be pretty close to getting in. Everyone kind of overreacts to the Super Bowl, so yeah, they probably get in there. Do you think Phillip Rivers is a Hall of Famer? Because I'm with like.
I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a whole bunch of quarterbacks that have careers like the ones that we're talking about, and they're all going to be competing against each other to get into the Hall of Fame. So,
yeah,
my personal opinion, I think Rivers gets in because all that organizational stability we just talked about. Ben Roethlisberger had the most. Eli had a lot. Phillip Rivers had none. So in my opinion, I'm putting Phillip Rivers in if it's my Hall of Fame. No, I don't think he's going to get in because there's going to be too many people ahead of him. But I think Phillip Rivers had less to work with than either of these two guys we're talking about, and he did a hell of a lot with it.
Yeah.
But Phillip Rivers, very similar to Matthew Stafford.
He's kind of borderline. There were some pretty good years there, and then I guess you can consider the organizational stuff. I don't know. I mean, he was considered one of the best quarterbacks in the league for a while there. So, yeah, I almost would feel more comfortable with Rivers over Eli, but I don't know. It's close to me.
I mean, You beat the Patriots twice in the Super Bowl. The Patriots are probably the greatest team of all time. It doesn't count. You don't get extra points for that.
All right. I mean, I guess.
Roethlisberger could never beat the Patriots.
Yeah. I mean, Roethlisberger didn't get the good fortune of somebody catching a ball against his helmet. I mean, so.
Right. I agree. They could have lost that game, but he got them there. Like they beat, they beat Green Bay in, sub-zero weather. Yeah. All right. So we could go on and on all day about that, but we don't have
But no, to put a closing thing on it, Roethlisberger, Eli, I think they both get in. Those other guys may be borderline, but I think they're both getting in. If you want my honest opinion. Now, I can talk about what I think, but I think at the end of the day, it may not be the very first time they're on the ballot, but I think they will both get in.
Gotcha. Okay.